Welcome, people, to the stream. We are getting a little bit of setup done, and then we are going to jump right into it. Just a quick second. I'm in a new place, trying some new setup things, trying to make this go even better than it did the first time last Wednesday. Let's see if I can move this out of the way. Nope, so I guess that's just how it's gonna have to be. All right, that's perfectly fine. Well, we have two viewers right now. Welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys have anything for me throughout the show, please make sure to throw that up in the live chat. I'll be answering any questions. I'll be taking any comments that you guys have as this stream goes on. We're going to try and keep it about the same length as we did on Wednesday. So be prepared for about probably a 35 to 45 minute show. And also, please let me know, how everything looks, how everything sounds. Any comment is appreciated. So we are going to focus today on the AFC South, which we're going to be going division by division, breaking them down, and then going conference by conference. So we're going to start out in the AFC, to the AFC East on Wednesday. Today we're going to the AFC South. And for this one, we're going to start again with the standings from last season. Then we're going to go team by team that way, and then do a little bit of predictions for how next season might go. So AFC South last season, if I'm going to be honest, it was a during the regular season, I should say, it was a fairly mediocre division. No team really had a standout season up until the playoffs. So for the regular season, the Houston Texans led the division, ended up winning it with a 10-6 record. The Titans were just behind them, 9-7. Just flip that around. The Colts, Indianapolis, went 7-9, and the Jacksonville Jaguars went 10-6. Now, like I said, these teams, their regular seasons might not have been that great, but their playoff runs, two of these teams, I should say, had a great playoff run in them. The Houston Texans had the Buffalo Bills come to town during the wild card weekend. They needed a little bit of Deshaun Watson magic to really get them that win. And then the Titans, if you watched any of last season, they had themselves a great deep playoff run led by their running back Derrick Henry, and at the time kind of uncertain quarterback situation being led by Ryan Tannehill, formerly of the Miami Dolphins, who they had just picked him up kind of on a flyer, hoping that he would be very good for them. Turns out he might be their guy moving forward. And let's see. Maybe give it a couple seconds, see if anybody else decides to join in. Again, thank you everybody for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. I guess from here we might as well just keep going on. I've already kind of started my spiel, my role, and we're going to start in Houston, down in Texas. And it's hard for me to say that Houston really made any great signings or made any great moves this offseason that would make them a winner or have them above a C grade for their offseason, because they made one of the most mind-boggling trades that I think I've seen in in my experience of watching a lot of NFL football and paying really close attention to it. But Houston this offseason really just made a baffling move. So their additions, there's a fair couple that the NFL.com has picked out that would be notable. So they picked up Randall Cobb, who is coming over from Dallas from the Cowboys. So he assigns a 3-year deal. We'll get into why that and could end up being very important for the team. Their kicker, Kaimi Fairbairn, stayed with the team. Darren Fells also staying with the Texans. Corner Philip Gaines and Vernon Hargreaves the third, him coming over from Tampa. Hargreaves, that is. I'll save the one that's next in line for last, because this that one kind of gets into what I was talking about with one of their major losses. So AJ McCarron is coming back on a 1-year deal to stay with the team as their backup quarterback. Safety, corner, and defensive back Eric Murray, Bradley Roby, and Jalen Watkins are either staying with the team or coming into Houston, trying to shore up that defense, especially on the back end, where they've kind of been a little bit on the weaker side. And then Brent Cavale staying or going to the Texans to help fix up that offensive line. And the acquisition that I didn't mention just in line with this list was the running back David Johnson. He was acquired via trade with the Arizona Cardinals, and I think I kind of just have to focus on who they moved for David Johnson, because Johnson's had a lot of success at the NFL level. He's been very good for the Cardinals. The only thing is, he's been injured. He's injury prone. He isn't one of those guys that you really want to be your mainstay back or your number one running back, just because you don't know how long he'll actually get to play. He's been hurt, that those legs have really started to go out on him, even though it isn't very late in his career. That has to be a concern, especially when you move arguably the best wide receiver in football for him, DeAndre Hopkins. So, I mean, with that, we're going to focus on the losses for this team. So they're losing two of their running backs. That's Carlos Hyde and Lamar Miller. Both of those two are off the roster. Instead, they've replaced them. They've picked up, like I said, David Johnson on the team and Duke Johnson as well in that backfield. They traded DeAndre Hopkins to the Cardinals, who he's immediately going to step into that team and be the number one receiver. He's immediately going to be the number one target for Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. For the Cardinals, that you have to look at that and say that's just a huge win for them. That's honestly just one of the biggest, I have to say, steals for them that you could think of in recent NFL history. Defensive tackle DJ Reader also leaving, going to Cincinnati. Barkevius Mingo going to the Bears. Jonathan Joseph, Jaleel Adey, and Mike Adams. All three of those are defensive backs, corners, or safeties that are leaving the Texans, which is what kind of prompted them to go out and get Murray, Roby, Watkins, maybe even Gaines and Hargreaves needing to come in and shore up those defensive backs and that secondary. So just kind of looking at this team, and this is kind of why I pointed out the Randall Cobb signing when I started looking at the additions for this Houston team, is that at this point in his career, Cobb's not a number one receiver. I don't think he ever truly has been a number one receiver for a team, but for him to try, or for the Texans to think that he's got the talent or has even something near the same level of talent as DeAndre Hopkins, I think that's ridiculous. I think that's honestly disrespectful to Hopkins if that's what they're going to try and do. Now, sure, the Texans have Will Fuller, they have other receivers, but at the same time, that really doesn't make much sense to give up or to move on from one of the best wide receivers in the NFL right now. Just doesn't make sense, especially when you have a young quarterback in Deshaun Watson, who's extremely talented and still on his rookie contract, which means you have the money, you have the cap space to go on and build the team around him and build that core with your quarterback at the center and not have to pour all your money into that one player, where you see teams like, I'm just going to use this as an example, like the Packers, or even Detroit, or Las Vegas, where they pour all of their money into their quarterback, and that doesn't give them enough cap space to give them the weapons or give them the protection that they need to succeed. Now, for Houston to move on from someone like Hopkins, who, again, he's not making a whole lot of money. His cap hit isn't extremely high by any means. For them to move on and then have kind of a middle of the park free agent signing as a way to kind of shore up that part of the game or that part of the field for them, it just doesn't make sense. Now, if you know me, you also know that I've never been a fan of Houston's coach right now. That's Bill O'Brien. Again, I just don't know. I don't think he's a winning coach. He's had plenty of success in Houston, but the thing is that he's never gotten them to that next level. This year they got to the first round of the playoffs, but that's it. They got there, they got to the next game, and they got smoked. They got absolutely crushed by Kansas City. Sure, they got out to a huge lead, but if you can't defend a lead or even build upon a lead, what's the point of having it in the first place? With that, I think it's time to move on from Houston, going just a couple hours north up to Nashville, to Tennessee. Now, Tennessee is an interesting case to me because they didn't make a lot of additions. And they also, well, they've had some losses. They've had some big losses, but it seems to me that this team has made the additions that they've needed to shore up or just retain part of what made them so successful last year under Mike Vrabel, excuse me. That's their head coach. So the additions right now for Tennessee, Vic Beasley coming in on a 1-year deal. He's an edge rusher. He comes in and essentially, hopefully, replaces someone like Woodyard or Cameron Wake. Those guys haven't signed somewhere else, so there's no telling if they're truly gone from Tennessee or if they just haven't come to an agreement. So the Titans have also brought back Derrick Henry. They put the franchise tag on Henry, who was one of, if not the best running back last season. He was awesome. In the playoffs, he just looked like an absolute freight train, just barreling through everybody, especially in that game against Baltimore. Dennis Kelly, the tackle, coming back to the team. The Titans bringing in Ty Sambrailo, another 1-year deal for an offensive lineman. And the big deal for them, though, is for their quarterback, Ryan Tannehill. Coming back to the Titans, 4 years, $118 million. Now, a lot of people would look at that deal and say, that's exorbitant. Like, that doesn't make sense. Why would they take a guy that really only succeeded for half the season, this little part right here, especially when you consider his last couple years in Miami were awful. He couldn't stay on the field. He was injured a lot of the time. He just really did not perform for Miami. He comes in and succeeds for this chunk of a season and this playoff run. And all of a sudden you're giving him, 27, 28, $30 million a year in that space. That's the type of money that the elite quarterbacks in the NFL are making. That isn't, just middle of the park quarterback. So I'm unsure with Tannehill. With that said, I do think he fits that scheme that Vrabel has put in place extremely well. He fits the role that they're looking for. He does pretty much exactly what the Titans need from him. And I think that's pretty much what they're going to try and do for the next 4 years or however long Tannehill stays with the Titans, is they're going to try and minimize the amount of impact the quarterback has on the game, shorten the field, play solid defense, and run the ball. That might not seem like a winning formula in today's NFL, especially when you look at the teams that really have had a long string of success. Right now, the Chiefs, with the last couple of years, and Patrick Mahomes, they won the Super Bowl last year on his arm. Teams like the Saints, they're really relying on Drew Brees' arm. Even the Patriots, they've always relied on Tom Brady to get it done late. Yeah, they've ran the ball well with James White and whoever else they've had. But at the end of the day, that's been Tom Brady's team and Tom Brady's offense. It's a quarterback-driven league right now. You don't really see this type of smash-mouth football much anymore. But thing is, last season, especially in the playoffs, the Titans did that to a T. They succeeded. They did what they needed to do, and they got far. They got as far as the AFC Championship game. They just couldn't get past the eventual Super Bowl champs. I can't blame them on that one at all. Now, for the losses on this team, I haven't gotten to this yet. I've mentioned a couple of these players, but some of these losses really could end up affecting this team greatly. So, I think he was either 1 or 2 overall pick, Marcus Mariota, no longer with the team. I think at this point, Mariota has to be kind of labeled a bust. Winston, that draft was Winston and Mariota. It was kind of just a battle to see which one of them went first. Turns out, I'm going to say at this point, seeing as, well, Mariota has landed on a team. He's in Vegas with John Gruden. Winston isn't on a team, but I would venture to say that even with his 30 interceptions last year, leading the league in yards and having 30 touchdown passes, that's a level of success that not many quarterbacks ever reach. I mean, Winston threw 5,100 yards last season. That's impressive. Even breaking 4,000 yards a season is extremely impressive. And not many quarterbacks do that. But right now, Winston's the one who's not on the team, and Mariota is. I think that kind of has to show the two players' personalities, which that was always a big thing in the pre-draft, process. Is that at this point, it looks like Mariota is just a capable backup, and that's what he signed to do in Vegas. It's going to be essentially a quarterback battle of sorts between Carr, who's making $25 million a year and has been there for how many years, and Mariota, who just got there and is probably going to back up. So, other notable losses for the Titans. Got running back Dion Lewis going up to New York to play for the Giants. Wide receiver Tajay Sharp going to the Vikings. Tight end Delaney Walker no longer with the team. Offensive tackle, this is the big one for me. This is the big one, the big loss that they've had that is really going to affect that offense and that team the most. And that's the loss of Jack Conklin. So, big offensive lineman, big offensive tackle Jack Conklin went up to Cleveland to play for the Browns. To me, that's probably the biggest loss for this Titans team because, Conklin and Lewan have been, for that team, two cornerstones on that offensive line, and they've really kept opposing rushers out of the backfield. Now, the Titans might have had a little bit more trouble on the interior, but they haven't had to worry about that, really, because for run blocking in the interior, it's a little bit easier to run block when you've got Derrick Henry, barreling down the middle of the field and just kind of breaking through a defense. So I think Conklin is going to be a huge loss, especially with a quarterback like Tannehill, who isn't as mobile necessarily as some of these other quarterbacks that the league features. Other losses are, most of these are, all of these, I should say, are on the defense now. Jarrell Casey going to the Broncos. Wesley Woodyard off the team as of right now. Two linebackers, Kameli Correa and Cameron Wake off the team, and corner Logan Ryan. Now, I could totally see this team going through the draft, trying to replenish a lot of that talent. That's kind of just where I see them picking up a lot more of the talent that they need on the defensive side of the ball to really get back to where they were and exceed the level that they played at last season, which if Henry and Tannehill and that receiving group can kind of stick together and the Titans can shore up an offensive line that'll do a good enough job at protecting Tannehill, I don't see why they can't perform to the same level that they did last season. So I think that's enough right now about Tennessee. We'll get back to them a little bit later when we kind of re-rank the whole division. Thank you, everybody who has been watching this entire time. I've seen one other person come in and kind of drop in and out, but thank you, everybody who is tuning in. I really do appreciate it. So now we're going to Indy. Indianapolis is, again, a weird case because they have a great coach in Frank Reich and a great scheme that they play, but some of the additions that they've made are a little bit mind-boggling, a little bit weird. So the biggest addition that I think that they've made is the fact that they traded the number 13 overall pick for defensive tackle DeForest Buckner from San Fran. Now they give San Fran a team that was in the keep in mind, a team in the Super Bowl last year now has the number 13 overall pick this draft. I mean, I think the fact that San Francisco was willing to give up Buckner for a high draft pick like that kind of just shows the amount of depth that they have on that defensive line and in that front seven. I mean, that's just kind of where San Francisco is at right now. But Buckner should be great for this Indianapolis team. He's going to bring a lot to that defensive line and that defense in general. Other than that, the Colts really haven't brought in too much. They brought in Anthony Costanzo, LaRaven Clark, both of those two. Clark coming back to the Colts and Costanzo coming in and helping out that offensive line. He's a big tackle. Xavier Rhodes coming in to help that secondary. And the big one, another big one, they've had two kind of big acquisitions. Phillip Rivers, the former Los Angeles Chargers, Carson Chargers, I should say, quarterback, is coming in just a 1-year deal, kind of a flyer for the Colts. To me, that shows that they really weren't ever sold on Jacoby Brissett, even though he was their guy after Andrew Luck just suddenly retired last season. Excuse me, I should say before last season. Andrew Luck kind of retired out of nowhere, and they just had to kind of go with who they had. They signed Brian Hoyer off the free agency market, and whether he worked out never really got to be seen, just because they already had their guy in Brissett, and now Hoyer is no longer with the Colts. Kind of on that note, we're going to shift into who the Colts no longer have. Now, this list is a little bit longer, which, whether that's good or bad for the Colts, is yet to be seen. So, right now, the list of the losses for the Colts goes, they've lost Brian Hoyer. Devin Funchess went up to Green Bay to play for the Packers. Dontrell Inman and Chester Rogers, other wide receivers, no longer with the team. That'll be interesting to see how Frank Reich runs his offense without those three receivers, those depth receivers, which I'm assuming they're going to try and replenish through the draft or through some later pickups in free agency. Big fast tight end Eric Ebron went to the Steelers in Pittsburgh. Joe Haig went to the Bucks. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they're losing Margus Hunt, Jabal Shared, Pierre Desir going up to the Jets, Clayton Gethers, and special teams, longtime kicker, probably one of the best kickers to play football, Adam Vinatieri, is no longer with the Colts as of right now. Either he just hasn't re-signed or he just isn't there. So all those losses really will affect this team. I'm not sure how they're going to run, whether it's going to be the ball's immediately going to be given to Phillip Rivers and say, look, you're the starter. I mean, with him only signing a 1-year contract, you have to think that between the general manager and Frank Reich, they had to have had that conversation. They had to have had that kind of meeting where they say, look, Phillip is a guy that we can bring in now and see if he still has any left in the tank and kind of see whether he can take us to that next level of success. That this team looked like they were primed for a great year when they had Andrew Luck at quarterback. But with his retirement, that changes a lot. That really alters the future of the team, especially in the short term. So I'm not sure how Rivers is going to perform for this Colts team. It will be interesting to see whether he gets the ball in his hand or they just give it right back to Jacoby Brissett, who led them to a losing season last year. At the end of the day, they didn't make the playoffs, even with a very talented team. I mean, if you look at some of the guys that they're losing, some of those defensive players are going to end up being day one starters for other teams. Some of those offensive players, Funchess and Ebron and Haig, they're probably going to end up day one starters for other teams. With them not coming back to the Colts, you have to think, well, how much does this team change? Because, yes, they're losing Haig, but they're bringing in Costanzo and Clark. Yes, they're losing Desir and Gethers, but they're bringing in Xavier Rhodes, who was a lockdown corner in Minnesota. This is a team that's going to have a lot of that's already had a lot of turnover. We'll just have to see where they're at the beginning of next season. And it's one of those teams where I feel like they're spending a lot of money and putting a lot of effort into fixing one part of the team and not necessarily focusing on other parts of the team that are just as important, if not more important. So with that, we're going to move on to the fourth and final team in the AFC South, which, if you haven't noticed, I am wearing a little bit of their gear. And yes, I know on Wednesday I mentioned I was a Jets fan, so it's weird that I'm wearing a Jacksonville Jag shirt, but I don't feel like I have to explain it really if I'm wearing number 15 for the Jags. Just a big fan of his, big fan of Minshew's. He just seems like a good guy. And we'll talk a little bit more about him later, especially with one of the major losses for this Jacksonville team. So the Jags last season it was very up and down. They brought in quarterback Nick Foles, Super Bowl winning quarterback Nick Foles, I should say, coming in from Philadelphia, signed him to a big money contract, and now he is no longer with the Jaguars. He's been traded to the Bears. I guess I could just start now with the losses for Jacksonville because I have to say the people that they brought in really aren't impressive to me. They haven't brought in anybody that I really think is going to make a huge impact on this Jacksonville team. So people that are losing, they're losing Nick Foles. Jeff Swaim, he's not that big a deal, but they've already brought in a replacement for him. Excuse me. Offensive lineman Cedric Ogbuwe has gone up to Seattle. Calais Campbell, that's a big one for them. Calais Campbell leaving and going to Baltimore. Same with Marcel Darius and Jake Ryan, both kind of stalwarts on that front seven, that defensive line area that they'd really need. And then AJ Bouye going to Denver. I mean, you have to think there's got to be something else going on behind the scenes in Jacksonville when you have just 3 seasons ago, they're one of the best defenses in the NFL, and they make it to the AFC Championship game. And now they're missing. They don't have Jalen Ramsey. They don't have Bouye. And they don't have any of that linebacking core that really got them to where they were just 2-3 years ago. There has to be something else going on. And even some of the players that they are keeping, they don't want to be there. So, I mean, with that in mind, we're going to go to the additions that this team's they brought in some people. Tyler Eifert, tight end, coming in, essentially just replacing their starting tight end. Eifert has been injury prone his entire career, only coming in on a 2-year deal. He's always had the frame. He's always been extremely talented, very quick, but the injuries have taken their toll. Rodney Gunter coming in for the defensive line. Rashawn Melvin, corner, coming in. Joe Schobert. This is the interesting one to me. Signing a huge money, 5-year, $53 million deal with $22 million guaranteed for him. Now, you have to think with them just kind of letting Campbell and Jake Ryan go that they think they're going to have enough with Schobert, and even guys like Al Woods are bringing in to shore up that defensive line, and then Tyler Shatley coming in for the offensive line. And the player that I was kind of alluding to before mentioning is Yannick Ngakoue, who he's their starting edge rusher. He's awesome on the edge, extremely fast, very physical. He's legitimately a star edge rusher, and they just placed the franchise tag on him. But thing is, we all kind of know Ngakoue doesn't want to play there. Ngakoue does not want to play in Jacksonville anymore. The team just kind of has the dark cloud over it. They don't have any success. They haven't had any level of success for the last, I could say just a couple of years, but that wasn't sustained success. There was no consistency. That team got pretty much as high as you can get, and then immediately like that, peters off and kind of fades away. I think that has to kind of play into the fact that Ngakoue doesn't want to stay there anymore. And the fact that a player of his caliber doesn't want to stay, and the fact that they've already gotten rid of Miles Jack, AJ Bouye, Jalen Ramsey, those guys, it's got to tell you something about the management and the leadership of this team. And the fact that even Nick Foles last season was a mess at the quarterback position for the Jaguars. And not necessarily in terms of their play. Nick Foles came in game 1, gets hurt. Rookie Gardner Minshew, which, like I said, I just have to say, I love Gardner Minshew. I think he was one of the better young rookie quarterbacks last season. He played pretty well. His accuracy and his completion percentage and his fumbles, all things that can be worked on. But for a guy playing with the Jags, for a rookie playing for a team as not great as the Jags, something's got to be said. The fact that He still threw for 21 touchdowns. He had a great year last year. But that in mind, he comes in, he steps in for Foles, is playing well. As soon as Foles is healthy, they yank him back out and plug Foles back in, and he doesn't perform. He doesn't play well. And then they look at that again and say, well, Foles isn't playing well. We already paid all this money for him. Let's put Gardner back in. Something like that, I would normally say, really has an effect on a quarterback's mentality or a player's mentality. But with a guy like Minshew, I think next season, if he's given the chance, if he's given the reins, I think he'll be just fine. He seems like he has that mentality of he's kind of looking back at this and saying, look, I'm playing with house money. I'm the one who has everything to gain and nothing to lose. I mean, he came in as a late round draft pick. Even throughout his collegiate career, he was, never the guy. He went to East Carolina, ECU, didn't make it, won a title with Northwest Community College in Mississippi, ended up in Pullman with Mike Leach, leads the league in passing, but after either not going to the combine at all, as far as I know, and having a kind of mediocre pro day, he ends up a low draft pick, and now look at him. Year one, starting out as a backup, ending up playing well as a starter, and now given the opportunity to possibly start for the team for the future. Now, even though the Jags have given all this money to Schobert and Ngakoue, they still have some money to play with. Do I think that they'll bring in a quarterback? Possibly. There are a couple quarterbacks that are on the market that they could bring in, namely someone like Cam Newton. I could see a team like Jacksonville going for Newton, especially if they want a veteran presence in that quarterback room or on the field under center. So that's kind of where I think all four of these teams are at. It will be interesting to see how they all kind of maneuver in the draft. Houston very well could, if they were able to move up and get a higher draft pick. There's a lot of wide receiver depth in this draft. I could see them going for a wide receiver. I don't think they have a high enough pick or the capital to move up for a high enough pick to get one of, the big name guys. I don't think they could get a CeeDee Lamb or a Jerry Jeudy or a Ruggs, but there's some other guys in the draft that I could certainly see them going for. Maybe a Brandon Ayuk from Arizona State, or if they wanted to focus more on a tight end. I mean, I know that they brought in Darren Fells, but there's Albert O. I don't have it in front of me. I think it's he's from Mizzou, Albert O. I'm not going to butcher his name. I could see them going for that, or even another offensive lineman to help out with Deshaun Watson. As for Tennessee, again, I think they need some more talent as well in the skill positions on the offensive side of the ball. They've already got Derrick Henry and Tannehill kind of locked in place. They are losing Dion Lewis. If they wanted to pick up a backup running back, they certainly could. And losing someone like Tajay Sharp and Delaney Walker, again, they need some more skill position players on that offensive side of the ball. As for the Colts, I could definitely see the Colts trying to work on that defense in the draft, maybe tinkering with that a little bit. They did bring in Xavier Rhodes, as I previously said, and Buckner, and they no longer have the number 13 overall pick, which that does kind of hinder, that does kind of neuter what they'll be able to do on that side of the ball with some of these draft picks. Because I don't think anybody's going to fall, or anybody that would truly help the Colts right now. I don't think anybody like that is going to fall into the second round, except maybe as an offensive player, an offensive lineman, or a running back. And as for the Jags, they just kind of need everything, if I'm being honest. They might have their quarterback in place. They're not even sure about that, so how can we be sure about that? Defensively, they've already lost a lot of pieces, and I'm not sure that they'll be able to bring anything like that back. And I mean, they've already spent a good chunk of their money on guys. I'm looking at this at the standings, and I'm not sure that there's going to be a lot of turnover. I mean, or even a lot of change, really. I haven't looked at each of these teams' schedules, so for that I apologize. I haven't done all of my due diligence, I suppose. But just kind of based on the moves that they've made and the fact that they're all going to be playing each other twice. I still have to think Houston's one of the biggest losers of the offseason so far. Moving, Hopkins for Johnson, I think that was just kind of silly. Bill O'Brien, I'm still don't like. Tennessee, I do think under Vrabel they're gonna improve on their playoff performance last year. So if there was any movement in this division, I could see Tennessee going up one. I'm not a fan of the quarterback situation going on in Indianapolis right now. I'm not sure that Phillip has what it takes. I'm not sure he has enough left in the tank to do what the rest of that team is ready to do. And at the same time, I'm also not confident I've never been confident in Jacoby Brissett. I think he performed well in a Belichick system, which he did. He got a win or two whenever Brady and Garoppolo were hurt. Or should I say, Garoppolo got hurt while Brady was suspended. Got to keep that in mind. And Brissett performed well in that system and in that scheme, but he didn't have to do much. That's not what you're going to get out of a Frank Reich scheme. He doesn't really work towards that. He works towards the quarterback kind of being a focal point of the offense and just delivering accurate passes and, on time, on target. That's kind of a Frank Reich offense from the quarterback position, and I don't think you're going to get that out of Rivers or Brissett for that matter. And then, just like I said with Jacksonville, they just need so much. What they need is, I really think Jacksonville could do for either someone up above changing or even the head coach changing. It feels as though they need a new culture. They need something to shake up the locker room, and whether that be Minshew getting to start an entire season and having the fan base be riled up for that, or having the rest of the team rally behind someone like that, or a coaching change or a management change, whether it needs to be something like that, I'm not sure. The thing is, as constituted right now, the only team that I see moving up or changing is I see Tennessee probably taking the AFC South and Houston dropping down into second and still possibly even making the playoffs. I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, as we saw in the playoff game that they played last season, Deshaun Watson is still incredible. He was great at Clemson. He steps right into Houston, and he's just awesome. He can deliver anywhere on the field. He's got the frame to kind of just stand up to tackles. He just really is the best quarterback in this division right now. And usually the team that has the best quarterback has the most success. The thing is, I don't think Bill O'Brien has what it takes at this point to take the Texans where they need to be. But that's all I've got. That's all I've got right now for everybody. If you guys have anything for me, please put it up in the live chat. I'm gonna hang around a little bit longer, take some questions. If you guys don't have anything though, that's it for me. I appreciate everybody coming in and seeming like you guys were hanging with me the entire time. This will go up live on YouTube just after this. So for anybody that missed it, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I'm going to hang out for a couple minutes and see if you guys have any questions for me. Well, with that, it doesn't seem like anybody has anything, really pertinent right now or anything kind of on their mind. So again, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I'm hoping in this crisis that's going on right now, everybody is staying at home, staying inside, and staying safe. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll be right back here Monday evening when we will take on the AFC North.